Hi! Hello everybody out in YouTube land. It's been a minute. Well, it's been over a year. So thank you all for coming back because I am finally ready to give an update as to where I was all of 2024. It's a long time coming. For a while I didn't really have much of an update, and then it became a matter of being embarrassed about how long it took me to share an update. But now I'm here, I'm back. It's December 31st, ready to close out this year and start the new one with a bang. So buckle in, it's story time. I'm going to tell you where I was, what I've been doing, and what the latest is with Back to You / Anatomy of a Love Song. Where to begin? Let's just go back to where we last left off. I was trying to decide whether Anatomy of a Love Song was ready for a table read, and I was really afraid it was cringe, which now that I'm saying it, it's been so long since I've made a video that saying cringe in itself is inherently cringe, but we're just gonna go with it because I'm an elder millennial, so I'm probably cringe in general. Anyway, I read the script at the beginning of 2024 because I needed to finally just bite the bullet and decide what to do. I read it and it wasn't cringe. There were funny moments, there were sad moments, it touched me, but there was just something missing from it. It was like it didn't quite have the heart and soul and that like emotional pull that I really wanted it to have. And so I had a choice to make. Do I stick with Anatomy of a Love Song? Do I find that pull? Do I find how to fix it? Or do I move on to something else? And I hated the idea of moving on because I put so much time and effort and energy into the script, but we don't believe in sunk cost fallacy in this house. Ultimately, though I don't like feeling like a quitter, I realized that this was the right story to tell, but now it had become the wrong time to tell it. And why it's become the wrong time is really related to what project I've moved on to, because yes, I have found a new project. Yes, it is going to be the project, but we're gonna table what it is because I need to tell you why Anatomy of a Love Song was no longer right to me. And it actually all started in January of 2023. January 1st, actually, because that was the first day of my last period, which is how you calculate pregnancy. The entirety of 2023, I was pregnant, at least up until the end of July. My due date was October 8th, 40 weeks from the start of the year. And at the end of July, I went in for a routine checkup and my blood pressure was slightly high. At the time they took it, I was really annoyed at my husband because my wedding dress had gotten cleaned and was being returned while I was at my appointment, and I said, please listen for the knock because it's a special delivery, you need to sign for it, and they will have to reschedule for weeks out if you don't do it now. And he had decided to take a nap. We sorted it out, don't worry. And I don't think I remembered to remind him when I left for the appointment anyway. Regardless, I was annoyed at the beginning of the appointment, so of course my blood pressure was raised, especially because my blood pressure had been pretty low the whole time, and I was taking baby aspirin to prevent preeclampsia. By the end of the appointment, I was super relaxed. I had been like reading while they were doing some fetal monitoring and everything was good, and my blood pressure was higher than it was before. And I thought, that's weird. And the doctor thought, that's weird, but because you are 29 weeks along and you technically could deliver, go to the hospital, get checked out, you'll get some steroid shots maybe, and then we'll just, keep on with your usual monitoring. So went to the hospital, and in the hour from when they told me to go to the hospital to when I got there, because I stopped home and I grabbed my iPad and I fed the cats and all that, my blood pressure had risen from, that's weird, to you might have a stroke imminently. Like, no kidding. They put bubble wrap around the arms of the gurney. And all the while, I was feeling perfectly fine. That was the most terrifying part. So, PSA, if you are pregnant, if you know someone who is pregnant, if you may become pregnant, because apparently I'm going to sound like a pharmaceutical ad, get a home blood pressure monitor. Check your blood pressure semi-regularly, because I wonder often if I had been checking my blood pressure at home, I would have noticed a slight rise and could have gotten on some more heavy-duty medication that could have prevented preeclampsia, which is what I ended up having. I stayed in the hospital pregnant for 3 days when my blood pressure rose to such an extreme, despite medication, and my platelet count dropped to such an extreme that I had what's called HELP syndrome, and they had to deliver me imminently, emergency C-section, so urgent that I couldn't even think if I wanted to get a spinal block or get anesthesia. If I took any time to think about it, it would have to be anesthesia, and I did not want anesthesia, so I got a spinal block. I heard the doctors call my insides gooey and my placenta angry, which any desire I had to eat tablets of the placenta was kicked at that moment, because no, I don't want anger in my body. My daughter was born 2.5 months early. I did not get to hold her once she was out. She came out screaming, which no one expected. And I saw a blur of a blob behind a fuzzy sheet before they whisked her off to the NICU. I was taken back to my room and on heavy blood pressure medication to help the HELP syndrome and preeclampsia go away. And this stuff is called a magnesium drip, and it makes it so that scratching your knee feels like a monumental task. That's how just heavy everything feels. And the first time that I met my daughter was 36 hours later when she was coding. Her heart stopped 3 times, and I watched her be resuscitated 3 times. I stood there holding onto a wheelchair. I thought it was 15 minutes that I was talking to her. It was apparently 3 hours. And I was in tremendous pain at the time, and I thought it was because I had had a C-section, but it turns out that my liver had gotten a rare complication, so rare that this combination of things that I had was featured on Grey's Anatomy recently, and so rare that classes of surgical students rounded on me in the hospital because they hadn't seen a case like this before. So after my daughter was stabilized, I got imaging done. Turns out that I had these hematomas on my liver that were at least twice her size, but probably more because it hurt me so much to lay down they couldn't actually get proper images of them. So I was in the ICU for 2.5, 3 days, and I knew I was getting better during that time because the nurses that they gave me were getting frailer and frailer every shift. Because I started out with this, I'm 5'3", started with this 5-foot woman who was probably 200 pounds of pure muscle, could probably bench press twice that, and who was helping me in and out of bed, to someone fairly strong and young and normal, all the way down to a 70-year-old woman whose mission in life seemed to be making me agree to let her give me a sponge bath, which I absolutely did not do. I was not having that at the time. And then they moved me back into the labor and delivery unit. But I stayed in the hospital for about 10 days, and my daughter stayed in the hospital in the NICU for 106 days, 3.5 months. It was a lot. That was end of July 2023 through middle of November 2023. A lot of emotions, a lot of stuff dealing with. There was the trauma of the birth, of watching my baby almost die, of not being able to hold her for 5.5 weeks because the machines she was on made it so, we're just so delicately attached that one wrong move could be problematic. The very petty, in comparison, grief of not being able to have a baby shower, of not getting those first moments after birth, of knowing what that kind of bonding stuff was like, and of also not feeling like I could bond with my friends who were pregnant at the time or new mothers themselves, because I was the worst case scenario. And throughout that, there were people saying congratulations, which is absolutely the right thing to say, but also it kind of felt like the wrong thing to say at the time, because while we were so grateful that our daughter was alive, we would also come home from the hospital sometimes, my husband and I, and look at the stroller still in the box that we bought her and wonder if we'd have to return it someday because she wasn't coming home. And I mean, ultimately she did come home, and she's a rambunctious, curious, smart, saucy 17-month-old now, and she's doing amazing. But those first few months were really rough. Of all the things people said, they said congratulations. They said I'm sorry. They asked how we were, which was really very helpful. One thing that stuck out in my mind, and that has stuck out in my mind, has been the phrase, so-and-so was a NICU baby, or I have a friend who had a NICU baby, and no one would ever know. And this is said as a, like, guess what? Everything will be okay in the end. And I appreciate that so much, but also that's why are we trying to hide this pain in this story? Because my daughter came back from death, essentially. She wasn't breathing on her own. She was intubated for 6 weeks. She was on a feeding tube for nearly the entire time she was in the NICU, on oxygen nearly the entire time she was in the NICU, and she came home without oxygen, without medication for her lungs, eating on her own. And these are all things to celebrate. And there is a picture of her that I love from the hospital. She's just a few weeks old, and she has her tube in, her intubation tube in, and she's just looking at me, raising her eyebrows like, Mom, get that camera out of my face. What are you doing? I'm so embarrassed. And I think the picture is beautiful, and it's not because of the intubation tube, and it's not despite of it, but that tube is part of her story, and it's important that she share it. There's this wholeness, this part of her story that wouldn't be complete if we didn't include the NICU. And so that's the thing that I decided that I wanted to explore in the work that's going to be my directorial debut for as a feature writer-director. I want to talk about how pain creates beauty and changes you. Because also the story about someone losing their grandmother and having to find out who they are and go back to the people. I don't actually even know what Anatomy of a Love Song is about, to be honest, which is part of the problem. But that kind of grief feels simple to me. Not that it's not worthy of a story, not that it's not painful. And my grandmother, may her memory be a blessing, Phyllis Greenstein, just died. I understand that pain, but I want my directorial debut to feel personal, all of the things that I've been feeling the past year. And so let's now rewind back to the beginning of 2024. My baby's home. We're dealing with being new parents. And I'm trying to figure out what the heck I want to write, because Anatomy of a Love Song just isn't it. So I went back to this old story that's kind of been like eating at my brain. And I had an outline for it, and it was called The Night Shift. And it's about a woman whose life kind of became too much for her, and she ran away and started working the night shift at a public access TV station. It was based on a time when I worked as a public access TV station on the night shift, because that place was bonkers. And I was alone, but I wanted to write something about that. And this story I'd shown to my writing group a while ago, and they said, that's cool, but what is this woman running from? Because nothing seems quite right. And so I thought, well, this is the perfect time for me to get back to the night shift, because I can give her something that happened. And what I wanted was something that would make people say congratulations and I'm sorry all at once. I wanted to go really deep into all of these feelings I was feeling, the experiences that I had, but I didn't want it to be about being a NICU parent. I made it so that she had gotten blackout drunk and didn't know what happened to her, and she was going to find out. And ultimately nothing happened except her friends didn't help her get in her Uber. I say it like that because that's what I wrote my first draft of. And it didn't quite work. And so then I revised it, I showed it to my writing group, and they said, oh, okay, why don't you go more into the mystery of what happened to her and forget the romance? Because it was a romantic comedy too. And I said, okay, and I did. It was like I couldn't get myself away from the romance, but I also got really deep into the mystery of it all. And so it just ended up being super bloated. And so then I thought, okay, I just need to strip it away and decide what movie I want to write is, forget what the writing group wants and thinks is cool. And so I wrote a third draft. And actually from scratch, the public access TV host became a DJ who was giving advice on a public access radio station. And the woman still was wondering what happened to her. Well, she actually kind of knew what happened to her. But what happened to her was that she got blackout drunk because somebody drugged her, like a bartender or something, and her boyfriend at the time gave her a hickey that she didn't consent to. And so it inadvertently became a story about sexual assault, except I wasn't talking about sexual assault, and it also had nothing to do with the feelings I was feeling. I was trying to do too much. After all that, I went back to this saying that I had heard repeatedly throughout the last year. It's right from the scar, not the wound. What that means is, because it took me a while to figure it out, and I've heard it 4 or 5 times from 4 or 5 different sources, so it's like the universe is banging at me, like shaking me, like, listen, is that when you're writing about something that's happened to you that is traumatic or has you a lot of feelings, because it doesn't just have to be trauma, write about it once you've processed it. Write about it from a place where you can separate yourself from it and take the relevant emotions and put them into a story in a way that makes it the best story possible. And that's kind of why I'm sharing with you today everything that's happened, because it's been a long year. And it's been a long year of processing all of frankly, the trauma that happened to me in childbirth and as a NICU parent. I'm still working through some of it, but now I have the clarity and the calm, calm energy about it, where I know what I'm going to share and what I'm not, and I'm not running away talking at you for 2.5 hours, because I could do that. There's a lot of detail that I'm leaving out here. And that's also where I'm at with The Night Shift, which is a working title. It's not what it's going to be called. Infuriatingly, I thought of a title while I was washing dishes a couple months ago and then completely forgot to write it down, and it's out of my mind. But The Night Shift was a story that I was writing, taking all of the emotions that I felt, everything, and just throwing them at the script like spaghetti at a wall. I was telling 4 stories when I only can tell one. And if I want to tell my story, I can tell my story. But this isn't my story. The story is True's, the main characters, and Adam's. They deserve to be able to have their space to tell their story. And yes, it is about grief and loss and hope for the future. Finding a new life when you've changed in a way that you can't express. But it's not me trying to process all of my emotions on a script anymore. I don't have the script yet. This entire year I've written 3 first drafts of The Night Shift, along with a work for hire script, which is separate and had not had all of these issues, because let me tell you, if I had spent this entire year working on one script and not being able to finish anything, I would question whether I could do this as a career. No. I am just working through some stuff with this script. I have my draft 4 outline for The Night Shift right here, and I'm going to be writing this script in January. And it'll be a first draft, but I will have had 3 first drafts plus 1 rewrite. So this will be technically the 5th draft of this idea, to process everything I need. Ultimately, this is going to be Sleepless in Seattle meets Wong Kar-wai as a love letter to Los Angeles. I'm just very excited about it. And it's going to be about love and grief and finding out who you are and finding joy and beauty in pain. And also falling in love and banter. This is my movie. So that's where we are, and that's where I've been. I've tabled Anatomy of a Love Song. I've turned my attention to title change to come, The Night Shift, and I'm starting to draft right now. I will be continuing to give updates, though they're not going to be regular and not as frequent, because I have a full-time job and a baby and no regular childcare because various reasons, which I won't get into. But we're going to be making a movie in 2025, and I'm so excited to be doing it. And I'm so excited to be back and sharing with you, because it's been a rough year. It's been tough working all this out. But now that I'm ready to roll, because we're going to have a draft by the end of January. So as soon as I have another update and a few minutes, I will talk to you again. But until then, I'm going to be writing like my life depends on it, working towards getting a movie made this year. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, like, subscribe, etc. Thank you so much for watching, for subscribing, for just being here with me. I can't wait to continue to share my journey of making my directorial debut feature as a writer-director. That was so clunky. I'm out of practice. That's all right. Okay. Thanks y'all for listening, for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.